My name is Jim Riley, and I was co-creator, writer, and director on Night Trap. This is mid-'80s. Nintendo is doing very well with their video games, right? Mario Brothers type stuff. Sega is doing pretty well. I was working with Nolan Bushnell on a series of interactive advertising and interactive retailing campaigns. And I got a call from a guy who was actually my neighbor, Rob Fulop, who had developed Demon Attack and a number of Atari games. And he knew of a guy named Tom Zito working at another Nolan Bushnell company that had actually been presented. There was a guy, an engineer who came in with this wafer that allowed you to attach it to a VCR and be able to interact with the video cartridge as your video source, but you could interact up to 4 choices at any one time. And they were trying to figure out what to do with it. So Rob knew that I had a background in live action interactive and introduced me to Tom. Tom wanted to put together some demos to take to Hasbro. And they said, so this is a relatively inexpensive addition to a VCR, and if we provide this enhancement, we can actually get into the video game business and allow us to compete. That's significant revenue, and now we're in the living room. We all came up with ideas, and my focus was more about these environments where you could go anywhere at any time or feel as if you could move more freely. One of the easiest ways to think of that is surveillance cameras. The first demo we did was Scene of the Crime to kind of test out, play test the idea of being able to move around through surveillance cameras and see how interesting that was. So in Scene of the Crime, the basic idea is that this wealthy man has a safe full of money in his library, and he has this new surveillance system where you, the participant, is the security guy. And he tells you to please watch the safe, and if anybody tries to break in, he wants to know about it.
Watch them with the cameras. If anyone tries anything, I want to know about it.
Then you can move around the house, switching cameras, to try to follow what's going on. Of course, everybody has a plot to steal the money, so you're trying to figure out who's involved, how it happens, and then after a 3 to 5 minute quick period, sure enough, somebody stole the money, the lights were out, it was hard to tell exactly who it was. You couldn't just sit in the room to figure it out. And then he says, okay, who did it? And then you guess. So really simple concept, but 4 of us flew back to Hasbro, pitched it to Stephen Hasenfeld and a boardroom of 22 executives. That day we got funding, significant funding, to start what became Digital Pictures. Then they said, okay, we want to do a title that uses this. And at that point, I was working on a number of other things, but I felt like surveillance cameras is great, but to have more effect on what happens, rather than just an observer looking at what's going on, if we could create some device that allowed participants to feel more engaged and be able to subtly change the story. Again, not branching or changing the ending, but in fact, be able to do something and watch how the story changes. And have to play it multiple times to really understand the subtleties of that. And that was the traps, which could be done even within this very limited environment. What happened, though, was, you know, everybody started to realize, wow, this is tricky stuff. Part of it is that there was never a real formula. Hasbro decided that it didn't want to move forward. They began, I think, to understand that this is a significant investment. This is like starting a studio. We all went away, 1989, and then in 1992, Tom negotiated a deal with Sega, who had come up with the Sega CD, which was just powerful enough to stream. Back then, it's Donkey Kong, it's Mario Brothers, you know, really simple pixelated graphics. And so all of a sudden, there was this option to play or experience a live action interactive world that was all photoreal with real people, et cetera. So that I think was the initial excitement. And so when the Sega CD came out, you know, everybody was just hats and horns, and this is fantastic, and look, we can interact with this. And we had a number of really interesting people that were experimenting, is really the best way to say it, with this sort of new platform. Not quite sure what it was. And everything from writers who were, you know, having constructive arguments about interactive narrative, which is very tricky, right? A lot of people will say, we don't want people to look the wrong way or be doing, we want to control their experience and to give this to novice or non-filmmakers, it goes against everything that they've been trained to do. The other side of that is the game, is a video game. And a video game, a really good video game, is you have full control. You're actually, the world is very believable, full of fascinating characters, and you're motivated to do a number of things to achieve whatever the goal is. But it's a high level of interactivity, right? And that's more important than the believability of your environment, right? So those are the two extremes. Even back then, those were the two extremes. But there was this funny gray area, and nobody quite knew what to make of it. You know, we called it FMV or live action interactive or whatever those things were. We'd bring in a writer, a director, a game designer, a software programmer. There were all these different people sitting around a table speaking completely different languages, having very different sensibilities, trying to find some common ground. The first concept was to take the sort of wealthy guy and, you know, with a safe full of money to the extreme. So it was a billionaire who had, you know, Fort Knox in his house, modern house in Lake Tahoe. He was able to do this with comfort and leave knowing that he had this next generation security system, which included the latest surveillance cameras and also these traps and gadgets that would allow would allow the 24/7 security team to be able to trap any potential intruders. And so happens one weekend, his daughter shows up for a slumber party with all of her teenage friends, and the house is attacked by ninja burglars. And the reason I thought ninjas would be the cool approach would be that they move in the shadows. You start off with this really simple, clean concept that, you know, could be refined and really have an edge to it and a look and
Orange. Blue. Red. Blue. Green.